What are Engie's best and worst weapons in MvM? Well, we're here once again to answer that question in the form of a tier list. You probably know the rules by now, but just in case you don't, this is a tier list based off of 2 cities MvM. It is from the perspective of a solo queuing player, and each weapon will be ranked on their utility within the respective weapon slots. So yes, wrenches and shotguns will be in the same tiers. No, this does not mean they're equally as good as each other. And as always, this is just my opinion based off my own experiences. If you have a different viewpoint, leave it in the comments below. Let's begin. Hey, remember when we added the F tier exclusively for the rocket jumper? Well, let's Ctrl-C, Ctrl-V that shit right here. The gunslinger is one of the biggest meme weapons in the game. Replacing your big hulking tank of a sentry with a little baby one is like ordering a pizza and only getting one slice. We all know you're trolling. Don't troll people. You may as well call them thought guns because they've taken 4 Ds in a row at this point. There isn't a single situation where the shotgun is a better option than any of Engineer's other primaries. I don't need to say any more because you've already heard the same shit 4 times in a row. The Eureka effect has a bunch of upsides that don't mean shit. The faster teleporter construction never matters in a mode where they don't get destroyed, and the ability to teleport back to spawn doesn't really mean much when you have an upgrade that can do it for you, and even then you don't need to do it that often. 50% slower construction also sucks ass, but usually you'll have an upgrade canteen, so that normally doesn't matter. But the biggest problem is that this weapon gets 20% less metal from dispensers and ammo boxes, which makes you have to spend more time getting metal for your sentry instead of, actually repairing it. It's got a lot of fluffy stats that don't mean much, but that one certainly does. The pistol might come as a bit of a shock considering I put it in D tier for Scout, but for Engie it's not as bad, and here's why. Although the damage isn't good, this is the only Engineer secondary in the game that allows you and your sentry to both attack different targets at once with the cost of no metal, and I think that's a common enough occurrence to be put in the C tier. The Thompson has one use, and that's shooting them at giant Uber medics and not allowing them to pop Uber. In every other way, this weapon is completely and utterly useless. The projectile is slow, it does bad damage, and can't even prevent small Uber meds from popping, unlike the giants. And even though it looks like it should have projectile penetration just like the Righteous Bison, it doesn't, not even as an upgrade. It has one very niche use, but that's the only credit I can actually give it. Only on the Engineer would a weapon where you routinely get a stack of 35 crits be put in the B tier. That's not to say this weapon is bad by any means, it's just a little too expensive to really make work. It only having 3 shots in the clip means you need to invest into a shitload of upgrades in order for it to meet its maximum potential. And that's money that the Engineer usually doesn't have until the later waves. There's also the fact that although 35 crits is plenty, that cap starts to look pretty limiting when your sentry is getting hundreds of kills each mission. This makes the Engineer either have to destroy his sentry every few dozen kills and spend a canteen to rebuild it just so he can make full use of the crits, or he has to keep his sentry alive and play the game without them. So for these reasons, the Frontier Justice isn't as good as you might think, but it's still a pretty big upgrade from the stock shotgun. The Southern Hospitality is pretty much the exact same as the stock wrench, lumped with 2 downsides in exchange for a mediocre benefit. For every successful wrench hit, you will deal 5 seconds of bleed damage, which, as I mentioned in the Scout tier list, is never worth it in a game mode with weapons that rip apart small robots before even 1 tick of that bleed damage goes through. This is in exchange for 20% more damage to fire, which doesn't really matter because your sentry fucks up any and all pyros, but the big one is the no random critical hits. Especially as you upgrade more wrench swing speed, this change hurts your overall DPS and gives you no upside to compensate, but it's nothing too terrible. Oh hey look, it's a stock melee in A tier. Yeah, some people like to claim that the stock wrench is the best in MvM, and to be honest I can kind of understand why they have that perspective, but I personally think that another wrench is just slightly better. The stock wrench is still very good. It has no negative stats that make it better or worse off for repairing your sentry or doing damage, and that alone is better than what most of Engie's wrenches bring to the table. The short circuit is really good against some robots. This thing completely invalidates giant soldiers, giant demos, and their small bot brethrens from even playing the game, as every single one of their projectiles gets evaporated by the Engie simply pressing the right click button. The amount of incoming fire you can block for your team is downright overpowered sometimes, and moments where the medic is forced to pop his shield to survive go down significantly. It's not as spammable as you might think, so you're better off timing your shots and conserving metal, but regardless of that, it's still amazing, and your team will love you for using it. The Widowmaker is Engineer's best damage-dealing primary. Easily. No contest, end of discussion. It is very cheap to upgrade at just 400 credits, and as long as you're doing more than 30 damage per shot, you literally never ever have to reload. And even if for some reason you miss all the hitboxes cluttering your screen, Engie's metal capacity has you covered, allowing you to shoot more shots than you otherwise would be able to. This is not only Engie's best damage dealing primary, but it's one of the best close range damage dealers in the entire game. And of course, shooting this at the tank combined with your sentry's fire gives the Engie the single greatest DPS against tanks in the entire game. The only real issue is that you still need to tend to your sentry whenever it needs repairing and when a buster shows up. So you can't farm damage as much as you'd like to because you have your traditional Engie responsibilities that you have to take care of. And because of that, I think it just barely skirts out of S tier. The Rescue Ranger is the single greatest utility in the entire game, to the point where after using it for so long, it almost feels like a crutch. This weapon just gives you so much freedom in terms of how you can really play the Engineer. You can repair your building from a distance, so you don't need to be in the line of fire when your sentry is getting attacked, so you don't have to worry about dying and watching your sentry go down with you. That by itself is an amazing trait, but this weapon's biggest claim to fame in MvM is being able to save your sentry from long range at the cost of 100 metal. This happens all the time when dealing with sentry busters or incoming spam that your sentry can't take. And again, rather than put yourself at risk to save it, the Rescue Ranger saves you all that hassle with just the click of a button. Its only real downside is not being able to do lots of damage, but the next weapon has us covered on that front. So here's a question. What happens when you take the most overpowered weapon in TF2, have all of its effects stack with MvM's upgrades, and remove the only one downside that this weapon normally has? Well, you get the Wrangler in its current state. This weapon is just fucking broken in MvM. You still get to double your sentry's firing speed and triple your sentry's maximum health, and those modifiers stack with the increases from the upgrades. Like, let me put this into perspective for you. The Wrangler will give a maximum building health sentry that blocks giants and is immune to crits 2600 health. Which, by the way, you can Rescue Ranger back to you if for whatever reason all of that health is getting depleted. And it has all of this while doubling the sentry's damage output. Oh, and you know the downside this weapon has in casual? The 3 seconds of inactivity when switching weapons? Well, because you can instantly pick up and put down your buildings in MvM, that one downside is completely negated. I don't know what else to say. This thing can single-handedly tank any damage from any giant or any group of robots in the entire game with a massive DPS increase on top of it. This is bar none one of the most busted items in the entire game for MvM. And now we go from 2 broken weapons to one that is just reasonably better than the stock wrench. This is actually a contentious opinion, but here's why I've come to that conclusion. First of all, I must say that this weapon's stats are mostly irrelevant in MvM. You get faster construction time, but you'll almost always be using canteens. This doesn't matter. You take 3 hits to remove a sapper instead of 2, but this almost never happens. This doesn't matter. You do 25% less damage per swing. This doesn't matter. So the real trade-off is 20% worse repair rate for 15% faster swing speed. But the key thing to note is that the repair rate only applies to the health and not the ammo. Now, here's a question. How many times are you repairing your sentry where the bulk of that metal goes towards the sentry's ammo and not the health? The answer, all the time. Bullet robots, robot pyros, super scouts, giants being wrangled down with your Wrangler, tanks, you name it. When you're repairing your sentry, you're usually in a situation where you want to top it off on health and ammo. And in those situations, whether or not the 20% health repair nerf is in effect or not, you still need to hit your sentry the same amount of times. The Jag gets those swings in faster, and that's why I believe it beats out the wrench, just by a little bit. And yeah, that's it for the engineer tier list. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more MvM related content. Like I keep saying, I got a shitload of videos in the works, and I hope you'll stick around to watch them. That's all I got, guys. Thank you for watching. See ya.